when we're eating an anti-inflammatory diet, you're going to find that we're eating a lot of legumes, and you're going to think every second recipe has some kind of a legume in it, like a bean, a lentil. And I could make the same argument for meats. There's only about 5 meats that we eat, being say lamb, pork, chicken, beef, and the like. So it's so bringing these legumes into your diet, they're actually an incredibly versatile ingredient. They carry flavors amazingly, and they give you so much in terms of protein, vitamins, minerals, and bulk. And the protein from them is some of the best protein. This plant-based protein is amazingly good protein for you. With this dish, I'm going to pair this with a little bit of fish. Again, I'm going to use a piece of haddock here. I had some nice fresh haddock. But this will work with anything: mackerel, salmon, haddocks, cod, you name it, even prawns. It's just a very, very simple little dish using grapes. I'm going to be using the beans here, Berlotti beans. What I've done with these is I've cooked them in some lightly salted water. I soaked them overnight in water. I always find that using the dried beans and cooking them yourself, you have much better texture than the ones out of the can, which tend to be a little bit overcooked almost. There's no little bits of bite in them, for want of a better description. Whereas they're very, very easy, they're very, very good value. And what I've done is simply soak them overnight, then cook them until they're tender in some water. I didn't cool them down under water, I kept them a little bit warm because I want to be using them quite soon. And using some celery here, again, a fantastic vegetable, very low calorie, very nutritionally dense. Some black grapes, which just chopped in half here, which are a great complement for many fish. The French call this a vernique type dish, but it's also very unique with grapes. But and also I'm going to use one of those little powerhouses of greens, which is red chard. Again, whenever you see colour in things, the more colour in your diet, the better. And when you see a green veg with this kind of vivid red in it, you just know it's packed with antioxidants, with vitamins, minerals, and everything else. Herb-wise, I'm going to, as I commonly do, use lots of different herbs from my garden. I've got some thyme, mint, fennel, some parsley here, which I'm just going to roughly chop and just use to finish. If you can only get a bit of parsley or basil, just use that. It's like the more herbs you have, and it's well worth considering maybe just getting a pot, even if you only have a windowsill someplace, and planting a bit of a selection of herbs, because very easy to manage and it's well worth it for making your diet interesting. One of the spices I'm going to use this is one of my favourite spice blends, which is Lebanese 7 spice. I'm using a half a teaspoon of it, but it's got a lovely, complex and very unique flavour, which brings into the beans, and it's just one of those ones it's worth experimenting with. You'll be able to seek that out in most ethnic stores, especially the Indian kind, less so the Chinese ethnic stores, but they have great selections as well. But the more Indian orientated ones with a good selection of spices and things like that. But certainly worth seeking out Lebanese 7 spice. It's a great, really versatile spice mix that really adds a lot of life to a lot of dishes. So without further ado, I'll get on to cooking. So in this little dish, the first thing I'm going to do is add a generous teaspoon of coconut oil. Again, whenever you're doing any kind of frying, the coconut oil, great choice. A good quality saturated fat, which is probably unique. Into the coconut oil, I'm going to add my diced onions. Nice high heat. And at the same time as my onions, I'm going to add my diced celery. Just to allow a little bit of flavour to develop into this. Just to speed it along, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of water. I'm just going to put a pinch of salt in there as well. I'm going to pop the lid on it and allow that cook for just a few minutes. Keep an eye on it as it's cooking, and just to get a little bit of colour into those and a little allow them to tenderise and develop a bit of flavour. So having cooked this for about 5 minutes, as you can see, there's a nice little bit of colour, texture coming into the dish. I'm now going to add in my garlic, my chilli, and my 7 spice. Now, I've used the whole green chilli here. you don't need to use so much. Because, again, just to adjust the seasoning yourself. Don't be afraid to play around with things for your own taste. You know, it's cookery. It's not some kind of, you know, it's what you enjoy. And generally the best way of making not doing well with cookery is just kind of being a little bit afraid of it. You know, just being a bit overcautious. You know, there's not really a lot to go wrong with food. And if it does go wrong, it's not the end of the world. It's only a dinner, you know. So it's, you know, don't get too worried up over things. Now I'm going to add my beans, which I kept warm, and I'm just going to let them infuse through that mixture a little while. I'm going to add about a half cup of water to this now as well. I want to keep it nice and moist. I want to kind of be crushing these beans a little bit as well as I cook them. Actually, I'm just going to add a splash more water than I even. It's almost a full cup of water. I'm just going to let those take on that nice piece of flavour and kind of allow them to break down. I'm going to kind of be crushing the beans a little bit as I'm going as well. So I'll just let those cook away for another few minutes. So I haven't allowed the beans just cook for about another 4 minutes there. I'm just going to use my potato smasher. I just crush them down because I just want to get not your normal kind of, I want to get a little bit of texture in here and kind of allow them to take on as much flavour as they can. And make a nice kind of, Berlotti beans are nice when you kind of do them like this as well. I don't want to puree them into a kind of a fine hummus kind of puree. I just want a nice, flavourful kind of crushed bean. And that's almost enough just like that. I'm just going to allow them cook away there. And if you think they're getting a little bit dry, just add a drop more water again. Kind of keep them nice, not wet, but not dry either. And let them cook away. So as you can see, I've just added a drop more water in there. And I'm going to put my lids on there because the beans are well on the way. There's not a lot of cooking left on these. I'm just going to pop a lid on those. And then I'm going to start my fish. I'm going to use a separate pan for the fish. And just pop that in there. Good non-stick pan, always worth investing in. And onto that, I'm just going to add a drop of coconut oil. Let that just warm up a little bit there. I had preheated my pan a little bit. And then I'm going to just pop my fish onto my pan. This is haddock I'm using, which is a lovely kind of a fragrant, I find, tasting flatfish or round fish, similar to cod. Just going to pop a little bit of salt and pepper on as it's on the pan. And then what I'm going to do here, because I don't want to be over putting too much temperature on this fish, I'm now going to take my grapes. I'm going to put my grapes around the fish, bring a bit of moisture onto that pan. Allow those to cook away for a second. I'm just going to stick over my fish. And then what I'm going to do is just pop onto my pan, which is quite warm now at the moment. Just like that, you can get an idea what I'm trying to get at. I'm just going to pop a lid onto it. Now believe it or not, and let the heat just build up a little bit on the pan. So the lid is nicely covering the fish. Let the heat just build up in there a little bit. And then I'm just going to push that aside. There's almost enough heat in that pan now to finish the fish. And just leave that aside there, just like that, and allow the steam and the residual heat in the pan to finish. the cookery process on the fish. As the fish is cooking, now that's not on the heat at all. And now we're just going to get my chard into my beans. Now, what I done was, because this chard was getting a little bit more big, it's just been washed. Lovely organic chard from a local farm here. And I just, some of the bigger leaves I just chopped up a little piece. I'm just going to pop those all into into my bean mix. Cover it up and wait a few minutes on a moderate heat there until the chard starts to cook and become nice and tender. Now this has been about just 60 seconds, literally just a minute. And as you can see, the chard wilts down really nicely, just like spinach. Now, chard, as it starts going, like this month now is just July and the chard is still quite tender. But as you start going in towards the autumn months, it can get a little bit thicker and tougher, and it just would need a little bit more cooking as well. So I'm just going to let that cook in through the beans. And now at this stage, I'm just going to add a little bit of olive oil, about 30 ml. And that's just going to enrich and give a nicer kind of creamy kind of texture, for want of a better description, into the beans. You can check your seasoning now, and if you think it needs to drop more seasoning. For me, that's fine, because the beans have been already cooked in lightly salted water, so they don't need any more. Maybe a pinch of black pepper. And then finally, I'm going to get those herbs that I've now chopped up and dump them all in there. Just let those infuse and just cook through my beans. So there's your staple. Some lovely crushed Berlotti beans, and with lovely chard, packed with flavour there. And again, very, very nutritionally dense meal. So I'm just going to cover those up, put them aside, they're cooked now. I'm going to have a little check on my fish. If you remember, that was covered up, and you'll see all the juice now has run off the grapes and the fish, infusing it together. And as you can see also, that fish, and that was just a residual heat, is now perfectly cooked, flaking apart. Not overcooked, not undercooked. It's a great way of cooking fish, this. And because it's been cooked with steam, and after protecting any omega-3 fatty acids within the fish. So as you can see, I have lovely grapey and fish, lovely fresh fish kind of stock going on here. But it's going to be a little sweet from the grapes, so I'm just going to add the juice from about half a lemon, just to offset that sweetness. And then just put a little trickle of olive oil in there as well. Completely optional, but have a little taste of that, and you'll find that you have this lovely, grapey, deep flavoured, kind of a sweet and sour, only for in its own kind of a unique way. It's a great way of doing a little sauce. So, what I'm going to do now is just going to plate this up very, very simply. Just going to take my plate. And then what I'm going to do is just take a nice spoonful, just with my serving spoon. And my beans here. You can be quite generous with these, because you find that they don't carry that big calorie punch, but there's so much nutrients in here. So I'm going to put some of my beans on there, going to pat it down a little bit. And that was just me dropping my fish slice, but anyway. I'm now going to just get my piece of fish, place it down there. And then I'm going to get some of my nice grapes, get it over the fish. And what you're going to find is those grapes are going to be a lovely counter to the kind of, any kind of, the chili and so on. They're bringing a nice sweet element into the dish. Some of the juice over it. And then you can garnish with just
A little bit of retained herb. I have used a little piece of fennel there. And maybe a piece of mint. The mint gives a lovely freshness to this kind of a dish. You could drizzle with olive oil. Personally, I don't think it's necessary. And there we have it. Our little crushed Berlotti beans with grapes. I hope you enjoy it.